I'm interested in some version of the gymnastics drill, the Jefferson curl. Extension from full forward flexion but with hands on legs for those with narrow infrasternal angle presentations. Some say that loaded/unloaded flexion drills are just accumulating tissue damage, but I have doubts, assuming that a person doesn't jump up to loading too quickly. I love it, Bryce. So I will preface, for those of you who don't know what Jefferson curl is, basically you got a barbell and you're loading over into flexion and you're slowly curling up one segment at a time, extending up. I'll link a video in the show notes so that way you can kind of see what it is. So the issue that Bryce is wondering about basically is flexion and is loaded flexion problematic? I did a whole debrief dispelling this because I don't think it is. A lot of times, and I'll link that debrief, I would strongly encourage you to check it out. In vivo or in vitro experiments, so looking at a hasa. Do you know what a hasa is, man? It's a pig. So looking at pig spines and doing multiple flexions, that is shown to negatively compromise the disc. But the issue is they're quadrupedal animals and it doesn't necessarily match what's going on in vivo. Check this debrief, but again, the research on loaded flexion being problematic just isn't there in humans. So I think it's safe. I think, and a prime example of this is look at Olympic lifters, look at strongmen. They're constantly loading their spines in flexion. Do all of them have severe back issues? Probably not. So I want to dispel that loaded, unloaded flexion is not a bad thing. It's a physiological movement that we should have available. And give yourself credit, human beings. You are adaptable creatures. We can adapt to so many different stressors. I mean, there's people, look at all the crazy sports people do, and they still live and thrive. So to say that flexing and rotating just a little bit is going to shoot your disc out the backside of your body, I think is crazy talk. So you're okay flexing. But now we have to ask, is the Jefferson curl a useful exercise? I will admit it's not an exercise that I've programmed a lot, if at all. I think where Bryce is going in terms of using it for a narrow infrasternal angle is actually pretty good, because a lot of times if I'm a primary compensatory narrow ISA, I will have a loss of forward flexion because I have an inability to nutate the sacrum. So I could totes my goats see a Jefferson curl being a terminal exercise for someone with a narrow ISA who has primary compensations. The issue is, I think it's very tough to segmentally control the spine the way that the Jefferson curl is performed, and I don't think most people have that movement capability. Especially if they can't demonstrate something like a stack at lower levels, then a Jefferson curl might not be the best move. But if you have someone who has their base level movement options, they move pretty well, maybe they have a full squat, you can see some curve reversal when they're doing a toe touch, I think it could potentially be a worthwhile move. You're going to be strengthening the tissues in that position, which I think is good. And also, too, it's a more challenging variation of a way to nutate the sacrum or perform a toe touch. So in that case, I think it's something that could potentially be good. What I have a hard time with, Bryce, is I don't know, in terms of the people who I work with right now, who I would program that for. And maybe it's just because I have I just don't have that much experience utilizing it as a drill. But, just me thinking aloud right now, that's when I could potentially conceive of using it as someone who has a narrow ISA, who's got good movement options. They can demonstrate a curve reversal on their toe touch unloaded, and I want to try to progress them at being able to maintain that position. That's when I think the Jefferson curl is useful. But most importantly, you will not break your back by loading in flexion. But also, too, caveat to that, make sure you're not just, okay, Zach said I can load in flexion, let's go. And, you do 225 on the Jefferson curl, and all of a sudden you're mad at me because your back hurts. Just like anything, you have to progress the load slowly but surely so your body can tolerate that. An issue I ran into not with the Jefferson curl, but with a different move, is the squat, or the squatty squat, as some people call it. Get out of here. But with the squat, I was telling a lot of people who weren't used to squatting that way to squat and try to be more vertical. And these were a bunch of ripped bros who aren't used to squatting that way. And what happened with them is some of them is they try to change their squat technique. They keep the same amount of weight and they're saying, Zach, my back hurts. This is BS. That squatting doesn't work. I can squat this way. Well, that's my fault, first off, if you are one of those people, because squatting in the way that I was talking about is a completely different skill from something like a back squat or a more hinge-like squat. So you have to alter the load accordingly. You've changed your strategy, so you can't expect that you're going to be able to tolerate your tissues are going to be able to tolerate the same load with a different movement strategy. Same principle applies to the Jefferson curl. You might have the prettiest toe touch in the game, but that doesn't mean that you're going to be able to do 225 on the Jefferson curl, no problems. Be smart and progress load intelligently, and if you do that, I could see the Jefferson curl being something useful. Awesome question.